Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer today. We are going to be decoding the mechanics behind two absolute titans of the human sciences, sociology and anthropology. If you've ever found yourself wondering how we actually make sense of the sheer complexity of human interaction, or how society functions, or even our entire evolutionary journey, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to completely break down the nature, the scope, and the real-world practical uses of these two massive disciplines.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. Here is our agenda for today. First up, we're going to unpack the unique nature of sociology, followed closely by its scope and uses. Then, we'll pivot over to our second titan, anthropology, and finally, we'll break down its 5 specialized subfields.
All right, Section 1, Unpacking the Nature of Sociology. Let's take a look at how sociology operates as this totally unique blueprint for understanding human interaction.
So the very first thing you need to understand is that sociology is fiercely independent. It's an independent science, not just some minor sub-branch of another discipline. It has its very own field of study, its own strict boundaries, and its own unique methods. Plus, it's a social science, right? Not a physical one. And that's a really important distinction. It means sociology focuses entirely on decoding the social universe rather than the natural or physical universe of atoms and gravity.
Now, this comparison right here is absolutely vital. Sociology is a categorical discipline, not a normative one. And what does that actually mean? Well, it basically means sociology acts as a categorical referee. It is entirely ethically neutral and maintains this perfectly value-free perspective. It just observes what is, rather than being a normative judge trying to dictate what should be or what ought to be. Sociology isn't out there trying to deal with problems of good and evil or what's moral or immoral. It simply observes the cold, hard reality of human association.
And building on that idea, at its absolute core, sociology is a pure science, not an applied science. This is another crucial distinction. Because it's a pure science, its primary goal is just the acquisition of knowledge and the building up of theories. It's totally dedicated to fundamentally understanding how society works. It is not an applied science that's instantly concerned with going out into the world and practically fixing things or curing social ills on the spot. First and foremost, it just seeks to know.
It's also an abstract science, rather than a concrete one. Think of it kind of like this. Sociology isn't really interested in cataloging the concrete manifestations or every tiny little detail of human events. Like, it doesn't want to document every single bullet fired or troop movement in a specific war. Instead, it looks at the abstract. It wants to study the underlying forms and patterns of those events. It looks for the universal patterns that cause wars or revolutions to happen in the first place, regardless of the specific time or place they occurred.
Which leads us perfectly to this next point. Sociology is a generalizing science. It is not particularizing or individualizing. It's looking for the big picture, always. It tries to figure out the general laws or principles about human interaction and association. It doesn't care about every single isolated event in society. By combining empirical observation, gathering facts and figures, with rational logic and theories, it zooms way out to find the generalized rules that actually govern human groups.
Moving on to Section 2, Sociology's Scope and Uses. Now we're going to look at the real-world applications of these theories and see just how far the discipline's reach actually goes.
Just look at the sheer breadth of what sociologists actually study. These are just 6 distinct research themes from the International Sociological Association. And get this, there are actually 55 of them in total. From armed forces and conflict resolution to the sociology of law, political sociology, and even something as highly specialized as socio-cybernetics. It literally touches almost every single facet of human organization.
But wait a second. Didn't I say earlier that it was a pure science? I did. But here's the catch. The knowledge gained from that pure science has massive practical utility. Understanding society scientifically totally improves our power for social action. The insights we get from sociology are absolutely paramount in solving social problems, planning for the future of underdeveloped countries, and even helping governments promote the welfare of tribal people. It basically provides the essential blueprint that makes any effective social action possible.
All right, time to pivot to our second titan, anthropology. We are officially moving from the blueprint of society to the ultimate, all-encompassing science of humanity itself.
Anthropology is quite often called a biosocial science, and honestly, it is arguably the broadest among all the social sciences. Why is that? Well, because it seeks to explain human beings not just as members of the sociocultural world, but also as members of the natural biological world. It isn't just concerned with one particular type of people in one specific place or time. No, it is concerned with all varieties of people in all times and all parts of the world. And it's even concerned with our close primate ancestors and their evolution. Talk about a massive scope.
The absolute crucial point here is the holistic perspective. This right here is the fundamental principle of anthropology. It dictates that to truly understand humanity, things simply must be viewed in the broadest possible context. Anthropologists, they don't just look at an isolated belief or an isolated practice, they look at this massive, interconnected web of biology, culture, and history to understand how literally everything depends on everything else.
Because anthropology is so incredibly vast, it has to be broken down to be studied effectively. And that brings us to Section 4, the 5 domains or subfields of anthropology.
Here is the ultimate breakdown for anthropologists. The discipline is divided into these 5 major subfields. First, physical or biological anthropology. Second, archaeology. Third, cultural or social anthropology, which is also known as ethnology. Fourth, anthropological linguistics. And fifth, applied anthropology. Let's take a quick look at what each of these actually does. So the first branch is physical and biological anthropology. This domain is intensely focused on our biological roots. It's totally concerned with the biological evolution of the human species. But it doesn't stop there. It also studies the anatomy and the behavior of monkeys, apes, and other non-human primates. It looks closely at the physical variations among different human populations to really understand exactly how we adapted over time. And physical anthropology is actually broken down even further. You have paleoanthropologists who are out there searching for fossils and doing meticulous lab studies to reconstruct exactly how humans evolved anatomically. Then you have primatologists conducting field studies on living primates to understand the evolutionary forces that affected early humans. And of course, you have forensic anthropologists. They use this incredibly deep knowledge of human skeletal remains to help law enforcement determine the age, sex, and physical characteristics of crime or accident victims. From ancient fossils to modern crime scenes, it's just incredible. Next up is Domain 2, archaeology. This investigates the human past by literally excavating material remains. Look at this really interesting contrast here. Prehistoric archaeology studies ancient cultures who left absolutely zero written records, none. So, they have to construct the past entirely from things like tools, pottery, and bones. Historic archaeology, on the other hand, excavates the recent past to uncover hard data that might be completely missing from written accounts, cross-referencing their physical findings with things like diaries, letters, land records, and even old tax documents. Moving into domains 3 and 4, this is where we really dive deep into the mind and the voice of humanity. Cultural or social anthropology, also called ethnology, seeks to describe and explain the wildly diverse cultural beliefs, customs, and social structures found all across the globe. Meanwhile, anthropological linguistics looks at the profound impact of human language. They study how the very way we speak shapes and is in turn shaped by our culture and our social interactions. Finally, we reach the 5th domain, applied anthropology. This is where all that anthropological data, theory, and methodology gets used to solve very real contemporary sociocultural problems. A fantastic example of this is medical anthropology. These anthropologists investigate the really complex interactions between human health, social environments, and cultural beliefs. They study different cultures' ideas about what actually causes disease, how they treat it, the abilities of their traditional healers, and the crucial importance of community in the healing process itself. Basically, applied anthropology takes that holistic perspective and puts it to work in fields like medicine, development, and education. Wow. So we have journeyed through the categorical, abstract rule-finding of sociology and explored the deeply holistic, biosocial web of anthropology. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a somewhat provocative thought based on everything we've learned today. If a sudden, massive shift in human interaction occurred globally tomorrow, based on their very unique methods and boundaries that we just discussed, who would you call to study it first? Would it be a sociologist or an anthropologist? Keep that question in mind as you look at the complex world around you today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.